All right, I see people are coming in now. We got a lot of hello futures in the chat, which is great to see. Thanks so much for everybody joining us. This is actually our first webinar at Hedera, so it's an exciting time for us to get started, start to talk a little bit more about what we're doing and where we're headed, which is really exciting. I'm Garrig. I'm part of the product marketing team here at Hedera. And with me today is an awesome community member that we have, Alex. You want to say hi, Alex?
Hi, guys.
Awesome. And Alex is actually the winner of our Hedera 18 Global Hackathon, an event we had just a couple months ago, which has been a lot of fun to see the progress with, and we'll give you an update on what they've been working on at Payper. Today, really, though, we're talking about building a decentralized app with the Hedera cryptocurrency API. I think this is a really exciting topic for a number of reasons, and we'll get to that in just a few minutes here. 1 second. There we go. And so what we're really talking about today is the impact that cryptocurrency micropayments will have on the world. We'll give you a quick overview of the Hedera Hashgraph platform and our cryptocurrency API with a few core concepts and what you can do with it. And then I'll hand it over to Alex to talk about their open source project Payper. Hopefully at the end of this, you guys have a good time. We have some fun. You guys learn something and are ready to get started actually using and working with our SDK. So we'll go over some core concepts that you guys can feel familiar, at least when you get to working on it, and feel comfortable with it and ready to roll. So without further ado, before we get into micropayments, I think it's important to talk about this in the larger context always. And that's really why decentralization matters and why we're excited about it. For me, at least, I'm excited about it because we're fixing a lot of broken things on the internet. From broken experiences of having to log in and have credit card information shared and really expanding the exposure that you have online, to creating these monopolistic markets with people that control too much of your data, taking away some issues with freemium models and things like that, to just having general data breaches, which we see week in and week out now. A lot of these things are caused by centralization in the way the internet has initially been brought about to mainstream adoption. And if we can start to rethink those things a little bit, I think we're all going to be in a better, safer, secure operating place, which is really exciting. A key to that and how we fix that really, I think, is to create these free and fair marketplaces that aren't controlled by a single entity, where value and assets can be exchanged directly between any party. And I think that's ultimately, when we look down the road and, maybe 5 years, maybe 10, that's where we're headed to. And we may not know all the pieces to get there, and that's okay, but we can start as developers really thinking about how we can start to build for that future world. A key component to that, especially when we're talking about this exchange of assets and value, is really the ability to make payments, which has actually been a long uphill battle on the internet, surprisingly enough. As we've looked more into micropayments personally, you realize it's something that so many startups and large enterprises like IBM and PayPal you see here have tried to achieve this over the years and for whatever reason failed. I think what's different now is this decentralization aspect, and we saw it with really the introduction of Bitcoin to the world and reaching that as the first mainstream decentralized application of these technologies. Giving us a look at the future and why exactly these micropayments and payments in general online have failed, and have really been bolted on with technology after technology to get us to this broken model we are in today. But the good news is that there's a better way now, and I think this is really the solution and exciting precipice for where we are headed. So if we look at this, why so many of these companies have failed and why they've attempted it and why we're still trying to solve this problem today is because you can create entirely new and disruptive business models. This can allow for very ad hoc relationships with people where you don't need to have that commitment from the consumer perspective of creating that subscription month after month that you're not sure if you're going to use fully or get real value out of. And it really allows us to extract the value that we're willing to pay for each and every interaction. By removing costly intermediaries, we can eliminate a lot of the overhead and costs that it would take to otherwise pay, fractions of a cent to access that piece of content or request that API. We can all do this on the fly in a very unique way that makes a lot of efficiencies happen, I think. if we look at kind of the consumer side of this, I think the earliest things we'll start to see is digital content. So we've started to already become used to this, right? As we initially moved from a subscription model, paying per song, maybe from iTunes, to that subscription model of, everything that you want available on Spotify. And now we're coming to a world in which we want to pay for each and every interaction and do that just in a more fair way possible. We're starting to see, the Wikipedias of the world ask for donations. And this is something that could be maybe the next level of that, where you're just paying a little bit per article every time you view it. Or maybe you're tipping someone that did a good job on their podcast today, or a webinar. I'll throw that out there as well. Giving us a little bit of cryptocurrency for every positive interaction you've had, or rewarding that, or doing that on the fly, which is really neat. And so those are the kinds of things that I think, as you start to think about how can I add cryptocurrency payments in a logical way to my application to solve a real problem, this is how it can be done. When you're starting to think about that really minor interaction that a user will have with your application, and how you can create now this fair value to be exchanged with that, whether that's 0.0003 cents or $1 or $5. You don't have this expensive intermediary taking away 30 cents for each transaction and a percentage fee. It's a very different model that we can start to work with and create some new applications and business models around that are actually sustainable and viable for the first time, which is great to see. And then on the B2B side of it, we're starting to see some great interest in not only API monetization. So if you have a world in which you're requesting it and on the fly, you can add a bit of cryptocurrency payment to that to get access, really removing us from that freemium model, or maybe having again to pay for a large subscription of API requests per month. This is the next way forward, and something to get a little bit more frictionless. And what I get particularly excited about here is if we start to think about the future of the Internet of Things and devices talking to other devices, or maybe your car wanting to park at a certain parking spot, we can have this all be kind of functioning around us without us having to react to it each and every time. We can have thresholds, like we'll talk about in a little bit, to allow for these types of payments, and we can, really create a process around us for the world of the Internet of Things to become fully functioning and start to build on itself with payments and cryptocurrencies, which is great. Not only does this make sense from just the viability of these things talking to each other, but it's also a good business standard where you're going to be able to pay exactly for what you're getting. You're reducing the receivables float, which simply means you're getting the money sooner, which is always a good thing in business. So definitely some real business applications, as well as technical implementations and reasons to really think about this and consider doing it. So the exciting thing for us is that our mainnet early access is actually here today. And that's really just as of this presentation, which is exciting. So you're getting a sneak peek here, but we have the ability to have access to our cryptocurrency API, which we're going to talk about for the first time, and be able to start to use that in a throttled environment. And over time, we're going to add our other services there, but as of today, you can start writing some cryptocurrency transactions against our mainnet, earning HBAR, and doing some really cool things, which we'll talk about here. So if you're not familiar, we have the Hedera Hashgraph platform. And so this is the tools that we have in our arsenal to start to use the Hedera network and the Hashgraph consensus algorithm to send cryptocurrency transactions, utilize our Solidity smart contracts, or use file storage, which is great for validating and managing your files on the network. All of these have access to a wallet. Today, we have that available for iOS and Android, and your ability to create decentralized applications on top of these core services. So similar to, if you've worked with Stripe at all, it's a very familiar experience with just using an API to send these transactions. If you've worked with Ethereum, dropping in Solidity smart contract and having that work out of the box is fantastic, and we get a lot of excitement in that. And if you want file storage, you can add that as really like an off-ledger pointer is probably the use case I'm most excited for, where you can validate things that might live in your Amazon S3 bucket. as being verified by multiple parties as being accurate in the right file. So some interesting use cases there that I'm sure we'll talk about in a later webinar, but for now, let's talk about what is available on the mainnet early access, and that's our cryptocurrency API. So when we talk about the Hedera cryptocurrency API, that's really the utilization of our cryptocurrency that's native to the platform, which is called HBAR. And so HBAR, unlike other cryptocurrencies, is extremely fast thanks to Hashgraph, where we're able to do 100,000 plus transactions per second with guaranteed finality in seconds. So this is, as you write those requests to the network, we're able to verify those extremely quickly and have a very scalable platform without any layer 2 solutions, which is a big deal and something that we think is pretty game changing. We also have the ability for these transactions to be fair. And what I really mean by that in this context is that they're not manipulated by the order of them with gas fees or something similar. You can have that experience be sending that, maybe it's a bidding system or use case where you want to have something like an eBay that's decentralized and you want a bidding process to go between two users, and whoever has that last bid gets to win. That's something that's pretty unique to our platform, I think, and we're excited about and seeing some cool use cases at a few hackathons by. And lastly, and perhaps more importantly in the context of micropayments, is this low fees. So unlike expensive proof of work systems, with Hashgraph, we're able to have very low compute cost. And with that, we can have very low transaction fees for micropayments. And I will asterisk that as you go on the mainnet early access program today, those fees are a fixed number that is likely to change, but at least give you an experience of what it seems to be working with the APIs and give you an idea there. So let's dig in a little bit further. Taking a click into the API, there are a few high-level concepts that I think can help get familiar with what we're talking about. The first is the notion of accounts. So if you're coming from somewhere else, like Ethereum, an account is a public key and private key, but we have a little bit more functionality alongside that, which we'll talk about. The other thing to note is we also have an auto renew period. So each day, month you have this account available, you'll be having to have a little bit of currency being paid there just to not have spam on our network and things like that. So just something to be mindful as you develop your applications and want users to have accounts. There is an associated cost with that account, and over time, if the auto renew isn't set, those will be light deleted. We also have keys and signatures, obviously. Out of the box, we have great multi-signature functionality. So if you want to have a threshold with an X of N that needs to sign, so of the 4 of us, 2 of us need to sign in order to have a transaction go through. That's entirely possible, and that's even both ways as well. So if you want to accept funds from someone, maybe you're a government official and you want to know exactly who you're receiving funds from, you can do the same threshold signature there to approve that transfer and get those funds into your public key. Additionally, you can have much more complex hierarchical wallets. So if maybe you're a business that wants to have your exec team sign off plus your legal team and want to have the majority of each of those sign off on something, you can have that ability out of the box too, which can open up some unique use cases and models for actually putting on to code how we want to think about this thing as an organization, which is pretty cool. And unique, and certainly not possible with the fiat and the old legacy world that we've been used to. And then lastly, we have the notion of receipts and records. So a receipt is after you send that transaction, it's a more informal, cost-effective confirmation of a single node's understanding of that transaction. And so that might be good for your everyday purchases, whereas a record is a more formal, court-ready state proof. That includes things like the official timestamp and copy of transactions. So maybe your extremely high value transactions you would want a record for versus something that's normal and you don't really care about it. You just want to know it went through, like paying your rent perhaps is something that's a receipt. And perhaps most importantly, all of these things, we have a series of SDKs that are, I will say in the early stages, and will have being added to over time, but ready for you to pick up and play around, open sourced on GitHub. You can check out the repo at Hashgraph and start to play around there and familiarize yourself with as well. And we'll be adding some more languages to these. I think Node.js and Python are still in the early days, but definitely recommend the Java and Go ones if you can get your hands on that. So let's click in again to more about what you can actually do with this. So we have the standard kind of create, update, and a light delete, which is a little unique to our platform. But how you're going to look at this is really in this code here, what you're doing is you're clarifying what shard number and realm number. Today, those are both going to be zeros because we do not have support for this yet, but we are planning for the future as always here at Hedera. And so something to be mindful of if you want to know what those numbers are. Just leave those as 0 for now and it'll all be okay. And once we have all the buzz about sharding and realms, you'll get more information on that. And then the public key is the public key for the new account. That's easy enough to understand and get going with there. So this is the Java SDK, and we have a full example actually on GitHub, a nice walkthrough. And if you're more into Go, I would highly recommend checking out docs.hedera.com, where you can get a quick walkthrough and setup and process. So next we have the ability to transfer funds, and this is super high level, so bear with me guys, but at least gives you some familiarity. So yeah, you'll want to create your Hedera account, which is predefined. And then you want to pull from the transaction query defaults. So this is using node properties, which is pre-set up with the SDK for getting started. And that's going to pull in the account balance that you're receiving from. And so if we want to transfer 100,000 HBARs between that node properties setup from the developer account into maybe a user's account, this is what that would look like. And then finally get that account balance. So this shouldn't be too scary. Should all be pretty familiar and feel nice and normal, which is exciting for cryptocurrency and the ability to do that very easily. We also have proxy staking coming, which is simply the ability to add that HBAR that you're holding to help the network achieve consensus, and claims, which is for instance having the ability to add that a user has been KYC'd to a Hedera account. Just for one example. But plenty more to dive into in documentation as well as our resources online. And perhaps more importantly now, we're going to hand it over to Alex to talk a little bit about Payper and his hands-on experience with the APIs.
Thanks, Eric.
You bet. We can see your screen and you're ready to go.
Yeah, thanks. Can't wait to make some more time to test the mainnet. So to say a few words about the hackathon, the hackathon took place 2 months ago, and it was organized in 8 different locations. We participated with our team from London. And the team is from Romania, Cluj-Napoca. We assembled the team a couple of days, or probably a few days before the hackathon. And we flew from here directly to London and landed there and just got in at the time when the hackathon was starting. And honestly, it was a bit challenging to, the theme of the hackathon was micropayments, and it was a bit challenging to come up with good examples or good use cases to implement, because I personally was focused more on developing smart contracts and studying smart contracts at the time. But the way we came to the idea was just by going through a few examples of what you could do with micropayments on the web, like paying for articles or videos that you watch, or I don't know, whatever web content that someone might want to monetize. And we did a step back, and we have decided to not pick one of these use cases and implement one of these classical use cases, but to offer a tool for people who want to implement micropayments use cases, so they could use a tool for their own needs or for their own project. So Payper is more of a concept, and this concept, to state it more generically, is about monetizing APIs. So when we use an internet connected app, either it's Facebook, Instagram, some Google service or whatever, there is, it is powered by the APIs in the backend, right? So those are web service requests that are happening in the backend. So we thought, why not try and integrate micropayments at that level, at the level of the protocol. And it basically works with HTTP, basically monetizing HTTP requests. And for the, as an application, we have decided to build a backend component. It is also called a reverse proxy, or you could call it gateway, that is installed in an API provider or web service provider network, and that web API provider would use the gateway to verify payments in order for their customers to get, or for their users to get access to the content or to the API requests. So it is very easy to install, and you actually do not need to even restart your service when you install this tool, if you do it right, of course. And after the installation, what you do as an API provider, you just configure the prices. You say that this URL costs that much, that URL or link costs that much, and so on. And this gateway works pretty well with front-end components. Like, imagine a micropayment extension, browser extension that would notify the user while the user navigates the web. It notifies the user that, okay, you're about to access a piece of information or content that requires you to pay for it. So you as a user could get a notification like, this costs, let's say, 15 tiny bars, pay or decline, and so on. So just a very high level overview of how it works. So you see on the right side, it's the API provider. You can see, think of it as a web server if it's easier. Either it stores articles or pictures or whatever web content. And then on the left side, you have the user, and the user tries to access that content, right? So in the first scenario, in scenario A, he'll just use a URL or a web link, and probably opening it in a browser. And then the Payper gateway, which is the backend component that I was talking about, will verify whether that link is protected, meaning whether it is required for the user to pay a price for accessing that content. And it just will query the price list and decide that. And if that link is protected, the user will get notified or will receive a 402 payment required status code. And this is a very interesting status code that has been lying there in the web design since the web was basically invented. So 402 is called payment required, and if you look it up on Wikipedia, you'll see that it is reserved for future use, and it might work with some kind of micropayment scheme. So it's the perfect use case for us. And in the second scenario, the user is informed about how much a given content costs, and he'll go to Hedera network, and he'll pay the required amount to the required account. And after that, he'll get a receipt. That receipt is basically a reference that proves that, or a reference to a proof that the payment has been created, like probably the record that Gary talked about a few slides earlier. So he'll attempt the request again, and he will include that reference, that payment proof. The gateway will take that payment proof, it will check it, and if everything is okay, it will route the request to the API. And then it will route the response back, and the user gets the content. So we have a basic use case where an end user has purchased an API or a piece of web content. Then this is so again, the use case is Alice owns a blog, for example. Alice installs the gateway and configures the price list. There is no need, in the case of our company, there's no need to change any code on your server. So whether you use WordPress to store your content or whatever other web server or web service or API, you do not need to make any extensions to that server. So you can just take it, and as long as it serves content, you can put gateway, the Payper gateway in front of it, and there you go, you have your APIs or web content monetized. And then Bob is the end user. He's an occasional user, meaning that it is not necessary for him to create an account and or have any type of prior agreement in order to consume content. So he'll try to open an article, Alice's article in the browser. He sees the payment required page, and then he'll probably use his wallet or a browser extension to pay for that content, and that content is then delivered to Bob. So I have a video of the Payper demo just as it was presented at the hackathon. So we have an API provider, Star Wars API, right? So he provides information about Star Wars characters, planets, different things from the film. And then he decides to monetize his API, and he'll define a price list here on the left side. And he'll say that, okay, after, let's say, to get information from for a person, he'll ask 340 tiny bars, and for the planets 100, or and so on. So after he's satisfied with the price list, he'll just start up the gateway, and now the internet traffic will be intercepted by the Payper gateway, and when an end user tries to access it, he'll get the 402 payment required page. And here the end user is requested to deposit that amount, in this case 340 HBARs, to that address. And unfortunately, we do not have a UI wallet, but here the user deposits the requested amount to the requested account. And now he'll take the transaction ID that acts as a reference to a payment proof, and he'll include it with the web request. And now when the user tries to access the API again, there you go, the access is granted. So what's next for the project? For the user experience, it's very important for this verification to not take a long time. So it involves some overhead, meaning the user would need to wait. So we'd want to find solutions to decrease this time to zero as much as possible. For example, by using something like a second layer solution or payment channels and so on. But for now, we're relying just on the speed of Hedera's transactions and low latency. So another use case would be that the users could get paid for uploading content. So it's not only the other way around. So for example, you could get paid for contributing to some API. For example, let's imagine you contribute with translations to Google Translate, right? And you can use the same backend component to enable rewards for your users. And then another plan for the Payper as an open source software is to integrate it with as many as possible front-end components, which could be, as I said, micropayments, browser extensions, for example, or wallets, why not? Another plan would be to also integrate with other cryptocurrencies, and then potentially go, or I don't know, contribute to some kind of a standard, right? Of how to include or how to integrate micropayments into the web protocols. And you can find us on the GitHub page. Payper WS comes from web services. This is the URL of the Payper organization, and you'll see under this URL, under this organization, you'll see the repository for the Payper gateway. Okay, and why is Hedera good for Payper? So first of all, it's the fast transaction confirmation and low fees, right? So these are the two properties of micropayments that are essential. So I don't want to wait for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes for a transaction confirmation when I do a micropayment, right? And I don't want to pay $1 if I only transfer 5 cents. And that's why I need low fees. And then another advantage of Hedera is the fact that Hedera supports smart contracts it basically integrates Ethereum virtual machine on the platform, and we could use that for payment channels in order to create a type of second layer solution and make the micropayments even faster for people who want to deposit an initial amount but without risking to lose it. And then my personal preferences or why I like Hashgraph and Hedera is, first of all, I'm a big fan of the Hashgraph algorithm. I have been studying it in detail, and I've been making presentation here in Cluj about it. And I think that this is the strongest part of the platform. So while other platforms try and struggle and try to find workarounds or trade-offs, so they see a trade-off between performance and decentralization. The Hashgraph algorithm consensus algorithm allows you to have both of them, so high performance and decentralization at the same time. And it's also nice that Lehman Bird is working to formally prove that the algorithm is asynchronous Byzantine fault tolerant. I believe that this is very important for the trust that people could get from the technology. And then I like the Hedera network because it's the first network it's the network that brings this algorithm and exposes it into a public network. And it's interesting the fact that Hedera have decided to implement an gRPC protocol, replacing the Web3.js protocol that Ethereum works with. So if you find this project interesting, please visit our GitHub page and you'd find issues, tasks in there, and I'll probably start and tag those tasks, which is a good task to start. And or maybe if you just want to see to take some code that you probably want to use in your own project, just feel free to do that. And that's about it. Gary?
That's awesome. Thank you, Alex. I think that was a good overview of Payper and a great example to see where this future of micropayments and cryptocurrency-based payments is headed. In terms of getting access to the mainnet, in a couple hours, I believe you should be able to head over to portal.hedera.com and be able to get set up there with both getting your account, your public keys, and your wallet, and then get started with the SDK if you so choose. You can also get testnet access, so that includes all three of our services: cryptocurrency, smart contracts, and file storage, by applying for our waitlist at hedera.com/testnet, and then join the community at hashcraft.org. We have some really good, both ambassadors that I see hanging out in these chat channels, and then Q&A as well going on there. So highly recommend joining there. And then we have a couple questions here that we'll hit on before we sign off. The first is really a pretty high level use case specific one. In terms of what use case of micropayments do you think will have the most immediate impact? So I'll take a stab at this and then I'll give it to you as well, Alex. So get ready.
Yep.
In my mind, I think the quickest path to adoption for this is really to start with this kind of blogging example. So today there isn't a great mechanism to have the average blogger get paid for blogging. And, a ton of developer blogs, for example, I think get thousands of views very easily, with really great top content that people would find valuable. So instead of having some ad-based mechanism, I think we'll probably see a combination of cryptocurrency by default, but also more in that tipping mechanism, which I was referring to earlier in this talk, start to be the slow transition that we have into this kind of frictionless cryptocurrency payments. And as part of our community testing program that we have coming up here, we're actually going to have open source code available to be able to add that to your own blog pretty easily, which I'm excited about. So I think that might be one of the first entry points we see. I don't know if you have any other thoughts, Alex.
Yes, sure. So I believe it's important to start with applications that are as simple as possible to the end user, because at the same time we're trying to attract people to spend cryptocurrencies, right? Mm-hmm. And HBARs in this case, Hedera's case. Yeah, so general web content, I do agree with that. I don't have necessary preference to either it would be articles or let's say videos or images. Yes, so for example, another use case could be let's say a photographer that creates nice wallpapers. He could get paid for those wallpapers, right, with micropayments.
Yeah, definitely. Plenty of exciting use cases to go around, and especially in the short term. I think long term.
Yes. On the long term, I believe that it's only the limit of imagination, because it could, I don't know, change the whole monetization schemes that we see today, right? As you said, with instead of paying subscriptions, monthly subscriptions, and maybe you're interested just to get content from different platforms, and you only need just a little bit. So, and yes, so replacing ads or making ads optional is another long-term effect of this.
Oh, I would love that.
Yeah.
That would be super nice. Yeah, and I think anything today that seems that we could make frictionless payments possible. So as I step onto my bus to go to work today, Today I have to push a card, and so it's strange to me that that wouldn't just be automatically deducted from my wallet and, be more frictionless. So things like that, I think, where we're kind of interacting with the world and small payments are being deducted, very safely, obviously, and with restricted access, is probably where that future is headed. When we talk about like cars, talking to other cars and things like that. As we look further down the road, that's, hopefully what we'll get to. The other question we have is from Kirthy. Sorry if I mispronounced that. How long does it take to get access to the testnet once we register? So we're reviewing those each and every week. There is a wait list. If you fill out that form in pretty detailed manner and, have an interesting application that you want to use and a great use case, they'll definitely prioritize you there. So I do recommend taking some time and doing some diligence in terms of getting the information down and being as complete as possible. With that, the quickest that you'll probably see is, I think, every Monday they review it. So if you have the chance to get it in today, you might be able to get it in on Monday, depending on your application. But hopefully over time, we can start to remove that wait list and get more people on our test nets. The other thing I'll flag there is that we do have throttled on that as well, which I want to say is around, I won't speculate. Anyway, those are throttled services. You might actually know better, Alex.
Yes, I think it's 1 request per second. The
Yeah,
last time I
right.
tested.
That sounds right. And I think we're changing that over time to get further up to speed. But yeah, it should definitely give you plenty of the environment to start to build around and use all of our services, which is exciting. And hopefully prep for our real launch. Yeah, sure thing, Kirthy. Thanks for the question. All right. Well, I think this was a good introductory webinar. I hope. We'll probably send out a survey after, just as this is our first one of these, and I'd love to get some more feedback from the community on if you found this valuable, if you thought this was a good stepping point to start to work with the SDKs, and if so, we'll look to be doing some of these for our other services in the coming months, hopefully. So thank you guys so much for all joining us. I hope you all have a happy holidays and welcome to the Hedera community. Would love you to participate in both the hashgraph.org one and work on Payper as well if that interests you. Where can they best find you, Alex? Are you on Twitter or Discord?
Yes, you can find me with Alexandru Malesh. That's a bit complicated. I'll leave a comment in the chat, or I'll try to spread the info somehow.
Sounds good. We'll get you out there. And we'll also follow up this with email and slides and a recording as well. Okay. So I hope you guys all enjoyed the content and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Gary.
Bye.
Bye-bye.